Hello, my name is Emma. I'm a practicing Catholic and I'm also going to a different house of worship every week. This week we are going to a United Church of Christ. So background on this, I know that they're very into social justice, they're very progressive Christians, but other than that, I don't have a ton of background information, so I'll head over and I'll check in with you after. We are back from the service. Also, Happy New Year. It's our first video of 2025, so very exciting. I will take you through a little bit of what I learned about the United Church of Christ first, just because I really didn't know anything about it before. And then I'll talk about the service, kind of my first impressions, walk you through it, and then takeaways. So what I learned about the United Church of Christ is that it was founded in 1957, but it was from 4 different groups that had previously existed. The big thing is that the UCC has this local church tradition, but also in this reformed tradition of church worship and, quote, catechetical teaching, according to the UCC website. So it has these basic core beliefs, but a lot of the teaching, like the organization, the worship, is organized by these local churches. The first thing that surprised me was how traditional this church was. So walking up, it had this huge steeple, these carved wooden doors, there was a ton of stained glass, and I think a good explanation of this is actually in the little handout that they gave. It was like traditional but not conventional worship. I would say in terms of music, it was also pretty traditional. They had a choir in these long purple robes. It was Epiphany, so we still had a lot of Christmas music, but even the songs that weren't Christmas, it was still pretty traditional music, like Be Thou My Vision. The pastor mentioned this at the very beginning, that for 2025, it's all super unknown, but one, know that God is with us, and two, be there for each other. And so that was a huge theme for today. They talked a lot about community groups. So for example, they had Bible studies, small groups, study groups, and also in the part that would be kind of like a peace be with you in the Catholic Church, here everyone greet each other with good morning, but it went on for a really long time. So I'm used to just saying hi to a couple people and then like turning back to the front, but this was like a couple minutes long. People were walking around the church, they were like going around pews to say hi, and it was clearly a very community focused service. Something that I found really interesting was there is the statement of faith, which was adapted from the United Church of Canada. And from further research, I learned that apparently there are multiple statements of faith that UCC churches can use. It's really just about these core beliefs, but the particular church can choose which one works best for it. Overall, it seemed like there were very few prayers that everyone said all together. There was a confession prayer, a statement of faith, and the Lord's Prayer. I think that might have been it for the main ones. There weren't really traditional mass parts like you would expect at a Catholic church. A lot of it was either like hymns or these few prayers, and that was mostly it. The sermon itself was, I think, 15 or 20 minutes, and I actually really enjoyed it. The main idea was Epiphany and kind of what we can take from that. There are a few personal stories, there's some good humor, all while tying in different Bible passages while providing historical context. And he was talking about each of the 3 gifts from the wise men, and the one that stuck with me the most was talking about the myrrh and how myrrh was actually used in embalming Jesus. In order to become human, you are also accepting death at the same time. And I think I knew this, but I think he laid it out really well, and that even in this beginning Christmas season, God already knew the entire plan. Looking at communion, it was very similar to most of the other consecration type prayers that I had seen where it was reflecting on the Last Supper. So this one, it was leavened bread, which was actually baked by a parishioner, which was pretty interesting. But apparently that the type of communion can vary by local church. Like they can use leavened bread, they can use cubes, they can use wafers, and they had little cups of either wine or grape juice. I've stayed in my pew, so I couldn't really see everything that was going on, but it seemed pretty much like a Catholic line up where everyone went down the middle aisle, took the bread, went off to the side, had their wine or juice or whatever. I did some research later. So apparently UCC views communion as one of 2 sacraments along with baptism. And they believe that everyone's like tasting Jesus and also receiving the graces from Jesus in communion. I was a little confused on how that worked, if we think that it's like turning into Jesus or Jesus is just present. The UCC website also talked about Christians who received and like how Jesus is present for those who partake. But this particular congregation invited everyone to partake. So I'm a little confused on the official understanding, but this might just depend on the local congregation since it is pretty separated out by local churches. So I would say takeaways. As expected, this church did have a large focus on social action. They had a whole page in the back about the history of the church and their role in becoming one of America's first congregations to declare themselves open and affirming of LGBTQ plus people, providing social services, protesting at the 1968 DNC, and then hosting Lincoln Park's first MLK March Against Violence in Chicago. So I thought that was really cool, but I also would like to point out that, as I said, this particular physical church as well as the service was really traditional. And I think it brings up a really interesting thing, is that in To have a progressive understanding and to expand the church to fit everyone in the 21st century, it doesn't mean you have to abandon the beauty and the reverence that normally I would consider with a traditional church. And you don't have to sacrifice heritage or what we would consider sacred tradition to understand that Christ's core values are the same, but maybe our understanding and our actual implementation of them may have to adjust to a modern world. Like I've said with some other churches, if I was part of the UCC, I would definitely go back. I'm actually chatting with my friend about Hinduism this week, so maybe I can check that out, TBD. Let me know if you have recommendations, and I'll see you next week.